Yeah, I'm just gonna warn everyone. I am about to sound like a massive hypocrite. Okay? We're just gonna start off with that disclaimer right now. Gen Z has a certain affection for plushie toys. They love stuffed animals. I am not a stranger to this. I own plenty myself. I believe I have some class about it. I don't take stuffed animals out into public with me like it's my little friend. I don't walk around. I don't take them to job interviews or whatever. I mean, this is just a little bit much. But the New York Post put out an interest piece in why Gen Z gravitates to plushies and why this is some kind of booming industry right now. It's because they identify as kidults and they are deeply emotionally stunted.
Started with the emotional support dogs being let in everywhere.
I mean, even that's better because at least you're responsible for something.
Yeah.
But no, they are emotionally stunted and need to pet these things and use them for sensory touch. It's kind of like a stimming thing.
This is very different than
like
buying them and decorating a room in your home with them.
That's how I feel about it. But then if I make the distinction, it just sounds like I'm splitting hairs, you know? But yeah, The Guardian just a few months ago published a piece about avid collectors of plushies from a brand called Jellycat. And a couple of them are Zoomers with disposable income. Ever since Zoomers started making their own money, they've been spending it on the dumbest things.
Well,
ever.
that is honestly perfectly reasonable given the fact that they've been priced out of the housing market.
They're like, I might as well buy stuffies.
That's what it is. I mean, it's the same reason why it's like, what do I want to do? Do I want to save money for something I'm never going to be able to afford, or buy my food for 900% overage on DoorDash?
They would rather buy DoorDash or
I get
buy
it.
some consumer good that sparks joy.
I honestly get it. Like, I'm not saying that it's necessarily the healthiest thing in the world, but I get the impulse. I absolutely do.
They interviewed a 25-year-old Jellycat plushie collector named Andrew Elliott.
Just knowing that there's like a brand connected to it just feels less like it's an infantilization and more that it has to do with consumer trends.
Well, there are different types. There are some that only collect one brand, but there are others that collect all sorts of them. Mm-hmm. So there's Squishmallows too. That's a huge one. But Jellycat is one that has its own cult following. So this Zoomer told The Guardian that these Jellycat plushies spark joy for him. He said, "They make me happy when I see them."
This is a guy?
This is a guy.
Okay.
Are you judging now because he's a guy? He said, "They make me happy when I see them. We don't live in the most fun and friendly times, so I think surrounding your house with smiley faces is a good thing."
Look.
So the world is so harsh and cold and cruel that you need to surround yourself with smiling plushies that resemble hamburgers and other food items and inanimate objects.
Look, I don't spend my money on stuff like this, but it's not like I don't buy things that aren't a little bit to like, you know. I would say that if you're to tell me that you don't buy at least one thing in your life that assuages at least the tiniest bit of like a hole in your like, if you don't fill it in with at least one consumer product, I doubt it. At least if you're single, if you got a family and kids, maybe, you know, all your purchases are of the up and up nature. But I bet you most people, if they're not married, don't have kids, they buy something that they don't necessarily inherently need.
Yeah.
But it does. For me, it tends to be shirts.
Well,
New shirts.
I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with buying something that improves your life or makes you happy in some superficial way. I don't think that's wrong. I guess it just starts to get weird when you're buying things that are inherently infantilizing. Not just that. It's not just as a decoration, but like to really like snuggle with it and like personify it. They're like anthropomorphizing them and like treating them like their friends and their children and petting them and holding them and like looking them in the eye.
People are mentioning alcohol in the chat, for instance. Okay, so which one would be more self-destructive for the average person, right? Then it depends on how far it goes, right? If it's a person who's buying a bunch of furry stuffed animals and it's infantilizing them, that is obviously not healthy. But depending on how much alcohol you're consuming, and that's, remember, coming from an addict in recovery, so this is not necessarily hypocritical. It's from a place of understanding. Buying something that dulls your senses for another reason is also just the same thing, but with a different type of consequences. Men would see it that way.
There is a false dichotomy here, and I think there are more benefits to be reaped. As a social drinker, I will say there are more benefits to be reaped from drinking for fun.
Well, that's what I'm not. They're saying alcohol, but they're not saying I buy this much alcohol. That's a completely different discussion.
If you were spending as much money on alcohol as these people are spending on plushies, you have a problem.
There was just an article. So you know. They just had another one of those articles on Twitter that was going viral today about like the level of alcohol use per generation. It was like boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z was like way down here.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, it's not because they're healthy. It's because it's poppers, vapes, and pills.
And loneliness.
and stuffed animals.
Another interviewee in this piece started her collection 9 months ago. She kind of uses these plushies as a stand-in for a service animal. At least that's what it sounds like. She has severe anxiety after leaving an abusive relationship. Has also been left paralyzed down one side after having 2 strokes. She says, I was given a jelly cat as a present to help with my anxiety, and I fell in love with them. I didn't know anything about them before.
Wait, so this person was in an abusive relationship and is now partially paralyzed.
Separate issues.
Let them have the stuffed animals. I have no problem with that. It's
lived on my bed ever since. They make me feel calm. They help with my anxiety. If I'm anxious, I'll sit on my bed with them. I like stroking the rabbit's ears. It takes the edge off things. If I'm feeling anxious, they bring me one and it helps. It's more than just collecting them as toys. It's like you form an emotional bond with them. But yeah, they ask these 2 Zoomers in this article why they find comfort in them. And one said, I didn't expect my collection to balloon like it has, but I like the fact that I can look at them and remember where each one came from, how I felt when I bought them. I wouldn't have envisioned collecting these toys at this point in my life, but I'm glad I have something that makes me happy. They asked a psychotherapist why these young adults are motivated to surround themselves with these toys. They say, when we feel anxious, it can help to focus on an area of our lives that brings joy. As adults, life can be overwhelming. The stress surrounding things like work, family, politics, and climate change can lead to feelings of dysregulation and a sense of being unsafe. These plushies...
Well, they had me up until the climate change part.
Plushies make the kind of toys that we had in our cots. They mean in our cribs as babies. If you think about the world of a baby, it's usually a safe place where we're surrounded by smiling faces in human or toy form.
Look, I would be willing to bet that there's at least some men in the chat that enjoy Lego, like building the full intricate Lego sets and things like that. And those types of builds, people that collect like figurines and stuff like that related to characters that they like. I think that most people actually in this space, if they're not just dunking to dunk, would at least be able to find some analog in their life to maybe not for the same reasons of like finding a moment of comfort, but they have something, a hobby that involves something that is not a necessary purchase that they enjoy.
We have another 20 from Pop Culture Junkie. I worked with a news director in 1996 in a top 10 market NBC affiliate who was in her 40s and had an office full of Beanie Babies. I don't want to guess how much of her income went for her collection.
I mean, it was 1996. If you're in 1996, you probably did have a bunch of Beanie Babies.
But that's a good point, because it's not just Gen Z that did things like
Correct.
this or collected things like this that seem a little bit childish. This isn't a brand new thing. They're just noticing that it's becoming more socially acceptable to embrace this out in the world.
Now, if we're going to talk about bringing them to job interviews and going out into public with it, that is a completely separate discussion. Because if I saw a dude coming out with his Millennium Falcon Lego set put together on his way to a job interview, I'd think there was something wrong.
Yeah, definitely. They say it's becoming more acceptable. A lot of people are taking the approach that I don't care if other people think this is dumb. This brings me a little bit of happiness, a little bit of joy, so I'm going to keep doing it. If you tell people you collect cuddly toys, it can feel as if you're going to be judged because it's like a children's hobby. But then you go on TikTok and see all these people the same age as you, women and men, and it encourages you not to hold yourself back. This is kind of the whole problem with the internet, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, I think I just read something about the difference in the way fandom used to work, where, you know, in I guess you could just say in the 90s, there would be a guy who's like really into Star Wars and his whole bedroom is just covered in Star Wars everything. Mm-hmm. And before he lets you see it, he's like, just know, like, I'm not crazy. I really like Star Wars. Just don't judge me. But now that guy, instead of looking at all of his Star Wars merch and liking it and enjoying it privately, he takes his phone and he shows everyone on TikTok, here's my Star Wars merch collection, guys.
There's money to
and
be made.
Makes it into a voyeuristic thing rather than a... You know, he's like...
Well, girls do that with makeup tutorials.
There's a difference between looking at the Star Wars poster on your wall... Mm-hmm. And gesturing for other people to look at it all over the world.
Well, back then, I think part of it is that, like, you probably felt a little bit more alone in your crazy love of that hobby. Now, the internet allows you to easily connect with people who feel the same way.
But then it becomes something other than the hobby in and of itself.
Yes,
at that point.
Is true.
It becomes about a community based around something that doesn't unite you on anything other than your consumer habits. They also mentioned the Squishmallow craze, and I just wanted to show this harrowing image of Lady Gaga, a 38-year-old woman in bed with her Squishmallows. Her caption reads, "I love my friends, my real friends, that I come home to a pile of rainbows because they want me to smile and celebrate me. I love you, friends, all your colors and your uniqueness, your kindness, your curiosity, and endless love."
All of it is just its own unique form of consumerism for all parties involved. Like, look at the Stanley Cup trend, which is literally like, it's a cup. You could get one just like it for half the price, but you pay exorbitant fees to own whatever the current thing is. That's how I feel about the name brand stuffed animals and stuff like that.
Well, at the very least, this does perform, the Stanley Cup performs a function for me.
It does. It
keeps my drink cold, and it's very useful. Yeah. I also don't have one of the Stanley Cups that has the big handle on it. This one does not have a handle.
She was telling me about how proud she was that she didn't have the handle on her cup.
Because the handle gives it a sippy cup vibe. An adult sippy cup vibe.
Your adult sippy cup, yeah.
And this is a little bit more dignified, I think. Yep. At least I'll tell myself that.
Look, I'm going to say allow all to love their hobbies. Just do, have some understanding of where the line is and to where it becomes socially unacceptable.
There is obviously a line. I'll get to that in a second. Jose Quintana said the 2020 movie I Care a Lot examines the guardianship industry and the possible abuses. Stars Rosamund Pike, Happy Friday, Brett and Empress. As far as the plushies, this isn't new. Beanie Babies, anyone? Long live PCC. Definitely not a brand new trend.
Just think, if you're my age, you probably had a parent who got into some type of Texas death match with somebody over at Tickle Me Elmo for their kid when they were young.
Was that like a really competitive product?
It wasn't for my age. It was for people younger than me, but it was a thing. What was the other one?
Super creepy,
Furbies?
Too. Furbies, the list just goes on and on, for sure.
I love the skits on Instagram. It's like your parents how many parents have like accidentally killed someone at a Black Friday event trying to get you a TV for half price.
But look, I'm just saying there is definitely a line. You have to arbitrarily draw a line somewhere because the line is arbitrary. The fact that it needs to exist is not arbitrary. And it comes long before you end up being one of those people who purchases lifelike, detailed, weighted baby dolls and creating a nursery for it and changing its diaper.
Yeah.
That is something that we've talked about before. OGs who watch the show every day will know about that.
Oof.
There are people who collect lifelike baby dolls that are weighted and painted to feel and look like actual human babies.
That was a creepy one.
They buy clothing for it. They go out in public with it. If that's your hobby, that shouldn't be your hobby. I'm just going to say it shouldn't, like, even if that makes you happy, you shouldn't do it because the wrong thing is making you happy. You're using the wrong thing to fill a void, and that's toxic. That is actually a massive red flag.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.